Hi, hello, good morning. Anybody home? Anybody from Guyana? Morning, neighbor, morning. How are you do? Are you share the life so long? Every morning I gotta come and tell you I share the life. Share the life, share the life. Please and thank you, share the life. It's Thursday morning, Mr. Jordan is going to be on. I don't want to be here too long with you. So share the life. The faster you share the life, then the faster you can get on with the business of having Mr. Jordan you come into studio and then we talk the things. How are you do? How was I yesterday? How was I last night? How are you feeling this morning? What is giving you hope? What are you excited about? I see a lot of people getting antsy about a lot of things in this country, but they ain't doing nothing about getting antsy. I wonder when you're gonna want to really do something about getting antsy. Anyways, if there are any Buxtonians on this live, which I expect there are many Buxtonians in this live, a group of villagers will be painting pedestrian crossings in the areas of Buxton, Friendship, and Vigilance, and they're asking for your support. They're asking that you join them on the 22nd and 25th of August um, to paint pedestrians, Buxton, Friendship, Vigilance. There is a QR code there. I don't know if you could scan it through your computer, or through your phone, or whatever. But they say scan the QR code and you'll join the WhatsApp group that's coordinating the pedestrian painting. All right, so please do join them. Please do. Um, then it's Booker, then in Buxton, you can go paint pedestrian crossing. If you can't go paint pedestrian crossing, then at least you get enough grandchildren and so you could go and paint pedestrian crossing. It's true. I just assuming. So you could organize to them youngsters that they don't decide, I'm gonna assist in the painting of the pedestrian crossing. If they don't know to scan the QR code, then they can contact Saudi Ejil. Saudi as they call her. She lives between she lives on the southern side of Gary Street, Gary Cornwell, where Gary Cornwell lives there in that middle street. She lives on the southern side, south of the railway line. I think about two buildings on your left hand side. Yeah, one building before where she lives is under construction. I think they live in the next yard. Has a lot of vegetation like banana and plantain suckers and so on and so forth. So yes, you can ask them, let her link up. Um, Let her link up and assist. We have to do things as a community together. We have to go back to the days of doing community things. Yesterday I was telling you all about crying off, Cornelius crying off on the sugar mill, right? That he bought from the government at Triumph and bought to Friendship and set it up and was producing his own sugar. Um, he wasn't only producing sugar from his cane production, he was also buying canes, from my understanding, from peasant farmers as they refer to them. He was also buying cane, right, from peasant farmers. While he might have been the first to buy a cane mill, the history tells us that there were two other persons who bought cane mill. One was at Golden Grove, Um, yeah, one was at Goal and Go. Where was the other one from? Let me see if I can find it. I know one was at Goal and Go. One definitely was at Goal and Go. This man has some accomplishments. His name, unlike the presidents, because in he's also, I would say, presumed to be the first justice of the peace, right? He was also a justice of the peace. Yeah, he was a justice of the peace, and so these are important things to know. You know, Kainov was not merely a farmer. He appears to have combined the roles of farmer, land developer, local government official, and industrial entrepreneur. He has been described originally as a trained cooper, later overseer of friendship, holder of agricultural land, and operator of the sugar mill or sugar works, as they call it. Good. So the man was a skilled man. But like I kept encouraging y'all, and I will continue to encourage y'all. Don't use your skill to empower your oppressors only or your employers only, whatever you want to call them. But you have to use that skill to empower yourself too, right? So he was a trained cooper, and among other things, and he did not stick to just being a cooper, but he invested in cane farming and a sugar mill and so on and so forth. Take a hint from your ancestors. That's all I can say. It is 21 minutes to the 8 o'clock hour, and it's time for me to call Mr. Jordan. Um, the numbers definitely will go higher. The numbers definitely will go higher. So let me call Mr. Jordan and let him have his way as he usually does. Good morning to you, sir. How you do?
Good morning to you. Not too bad. I thought you were having a snooze while the program was running because for a little while there was no sound.
Yeah, usually when I start the program, it is without sound for about 10 minutes.
Yes, but
I
you were
leave it.
snoozing a bit longer today.
Yeah, it happens. So you gonna do?
I know.
Yeah, what you gonna do? It's life.
Just
Yeah,
like this.
you know, sometimes we take life too damn serious. Everything we fretting
That is true.
and standing up with pressure about.
That is true. That
Yes.
is why I enjoy the Thursday morning banter. The early banter Thursday morning. It's just to keep it light,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and to signal that the week is coming to an end. And you have to free up from all of the pains that you might have had, the working pains that you might have had earlier in the week. Yes, so it's another Thursday, and as usual, thankful Thursday. Raymond 70 on the 18th, and I was 69 on the 4th of August, hoping that God will continue to shower his rich blessings on us so that we can see many more birthdays. We can celebrate many more birthdays. And you know, Tuesday, August the 18th was also a great day in the history of Guyana. And it was unfortunate that that day up to today has not gained the prominence that it should have had. Because Tuesday, 18th of August, 2026, marked the 203rd anniversary of the Demerara Slave Rebellion, a massive uprising involving between 9,000 and 12,000 enslaved people in the then British colony of Demerara Essequibo, which joined with Berbice to by the British to be called what is known today as Guyana. That rebellion lasted 2 days, 2 days, and I hope the likes of the James Bonds are listening, because I saw him put a post out there about the Demerara slave rebellion happening on the 18th of August, 1833. I'm hoping it's a slip, but I've seen it running for days and it hasn't been corrected. The Demerara slave rebellion occurred on the 18th of August, 1823, for which a monument is cited by the seawall, incorrectly cited by the seawall, because it should have been cited on what we call parade ground, which is opposite the Promenade Gardens in Middle Street, right? I know our folks, many African groups fought for that monument to be sited on parade ground, but they were fighting a government that seems to think that that part of our history don't exist in this country. It was easy to put a statue in the Promenade Gardens of Mahatma Gandhi, who has virtually nothing to do with Guyana. But it was a great fight, a losing battle, to put a monument to the uprising of 1823 on the very spot where people were hanged and their heads stuck on staves and left there for days to rot. But also as a reminder to the enslaved people of what can happen to you if you rebel. It is then cited a place of virtually no significance near to the seawall there, 1823 monument. Yes, so it was a rebellion that was undertaken by anywhere between 9 to 12,000 enslaved people in the British colony of Essequibo Demerara. And as I said, it lasted 2 days. 2 days. The rebellion was led by Jack Gladstone, who was a cooper on plantation Success, and his father, Kwamino, who was a senior church deacon at the time. Plantation Success on the east coast of Demerara was owned by John Gladstone, who was the father of the future British Prime Minister, William Gladstone. And drawing inspiration from the belief that freedom had been granted by the British Parliament, but that it was being withheld, right, by the local plantation owners, the slaves rose up and demanded their freedom. So that on that fateful day of 18th August 1823, Jack Gladstone rang the plantation bell to start, signaling the start of the uprising. Eventually, though, the rebels, after 2 days, the rebels were captured and locked up by the estate managers and the overseers. I'm sorry, it's the other way around. I'm reading that the other way around. The rebels captured the overseers and the plantation managers and locked them up in, in the barns and so on that they had on the estates rather than killing them, because the intent was not to kill them. It was to extract from them their freedom. So unlike other rebellions where plantation owners and so on were actually killed in an act of revenge for what the slaves would have gone through, in the Demerara uprising, the slaves didn't kill the estate managers and the plantation owners. They actually locked them up in the barns and so on the plantation. But of course, this would not have lasted for long, because the British colonial military then got into the act. They retaliated with what we call brute force and ignorance. At Bachelor's Adventure, same Bachelor's Adventure that we know about today, about 2,000 armed enslaved people confronted the troops. And of course, machetes and sticks are no match for guns and bullets and pellets, as Mr. Bond can testify. And as a result, 200 of the slaves were killed at that particular junction at Bachelor's Adventure. In the aftermath of the rebellion, the colonial authorities hunted down hundreds of the rebels, decapitating many and displaying their heads on poles as a warning, as I indicated earlier. Commoner himself was struck down in September of 1823 and killed by the British military forces. His body was hung in chains and left there to rot. As Nigel Westmus observed in Sabbath News of May the 7th, 2023, on the occasion of the 200th anniversary of the uprising, he said, quote, "It is impossible to overstate the significance of the massive revolt in Guyana, sandwiched as it was between two other momentous CARICOM slave rebellions. The one in Barbados, Busa, in 1816, and the Jamaican insurrection in 1831. Together, all three revolts helped to undermine the political, economic, and moral foundations of the British imperial plantation system, and consequently, the existence of the worldwide chattel slavery. Because indeed, everywhere that chattel slavery existed, it was characterized by the immense disruption of Black lives. The daily violence, the whippings, the branding, the family separations, the rapes, the individual and collective brutality, the denial of cultural and human rights, and the general dehumanization. And as McGowan eminent Professor McGowan, who taught many years at University of Guyana, noted in Communist capture on September 1823, he noted that this capture was done, quote, by an Amerindian in an expedition of militiamen and Amerindians sent by the government and planters to capture fugitives, end of quote. And I will come back to this business about the Amerindians shortly. In all, 72 slaves were tried, right? This is in addition to this is not counting the 200 that were actually killed at Bachelor's Adventure. These were among the captured. 72 were captured and tried. 51 were condemned to death, and 33 were executed. Jack Gladstone and his wife were also captured at Chateau Margaux. They too were tried and then escaped the ultimate punishment, but were banished to St. Lucia. You know, when you read Black history and you read it and feel it and understand it, and the horrors that our foreparents went through, and their resilience to rise above it, to move on with their lives in their villages and so on. You ask yourself how any descendant of African slaves in this country can allow themselves to be re-enslaved mentally, some of them physically, many of them economically. How, in the context of our history, that we can allow ourselves to be today at the bottom of the ladder. And I am saying that. Cherry said it a couple of years ago. He claimed he was misquoted or misunderstood. The reality is still the same, that Black Africans are at the bottom of the ladder. If not there, then they're near to the bottom with the indigenous people. And I will come to that just now. How we can allow ourselves today to be in that position. And many of us are sleepwalking our way into slavery, notwithstanding the hard work of our ancestors. Nigel Westmos was on point when he said in that same article, there are serious attempts to erase Black history in the context of the history of Guyana, and that we must push back against this happening. Do recall Black celebrations, Black history. Black history is not taught anywhere in this country. Black celebrations are muted if it has to be done at the national level, and there's only essentially one that has some prominence, which is the Emancipation Day, when everybody seems to go and buy a cheap colored shirt or a dashiki and put it on and think that they are grounding with the Africans. When the very Africans who do the same thing don't even know the reason why they're putting it on. We are being led this way because many of us don't know our history. The few that know it don't teach it. Don't broadcast it. Don't use the various media to tell that story. On the 18th of August of this year, tell me how many people knew about the Demerara uprising. Even the little celebration that they had or observance that they had at the 1823 monument by the APNU was not even broadcast fully. It certainly was not broadcast on national television. And I don't know which television, if any at all, carried it. And I don't know if APNU had money to buy TV rights so that it could have been broadcast around the country. And I don't know how many African groups in this country, over 200 and something of them, I don't know how many of them observed that critical moment in our history. Because the 1823 rebellion stands alongside the 1763 revolution that marked the beginning of the Republic of Guyana. It may not get the prominence, but that part of our history should be corrected, because the 1823 rebellion was the forerunner to our subsequent freedom in 1838. The average school child getting 30 subjects and 27 subjects and so on don't know this history because it's not being taught in schools. It's not being taught in the technical institutes. It's not being taught at the teachers training college. So the descendants of Africans in this country, the descendants of slaves in this country, a country that their foreparents built, are rudderless, historyless. And in that capacity, they become fodder for the other. That is why you can have the political situation that you have today in Guyana. That is why you could have the economic situation that you have in Guyana. That is why you could have the social situation that you have in Guyana. That is why you could have the cultural situation, the cultural imperialism that you have in this country. There's a struggle to even celebrate Emancipation Day, where Black groups have to go and beg other people for money to celebrate. Where the government of the day don't see it as part of the so-called One Guyana and Unity Guyana to make certain that these celebrations take pride of place and importance in the calendar. They're not putting the history of Guyana as part of the curriculum of schools. These schools are being burdened with all kinds of other subjects, 30 plus of them, but none of them teaches African Guyanese history. And none of our African groups in the country make this history a staple in the growing up of the African child. 18th of August, 2 days ago, passed without a national recognition of that fateful day. But every year, you're bombarded with Enmore Martyrs Day. Every year. you bombarded in more Martyrs Day. Not a struggle that I want to depreciate, because it was the PNC government that recognized that struggle and made it and brought it into the prominence that it gets today. But they would have made a mistake in not making the 1823 uprising, slave uprising, a signal event in our history, because it was the precursor and it hastened the eventual quote unquote freedom of the enslaved people. And that is why it is so important. That is why it's so important. While 1763 might have struck the first blow for freedom in this country, it was way off relative to 1823. And the 1823 uprising would have had more slaves that were involved. It might have been better organized, perhaps. But what the 1763 had over the 1823 is that the 1763 lasted longer, whereas the 1823 one lasted only 2 days. And the brutality of the British and the British governor was unheard of. People's heads being severed and the head being put on staves and left there in the open to rot, so that the slaves passing every day looking at these heads rotting, and there it lay, being a reminder of your fate if you only attempted another revolution. People being hanged in chains and left to rot. It was said Kwamina was left to rot in chains, and he spent so many days there that bees, wasps, end up building a nest in what was left, what the hollow that was there for his stomach. That is the brutality of the British. And you're telling me after those, if those things don't awaken you to make you do better, for that to forge a fire in you to make your next generations better, tell me what will. But you know why? The history is not being taught. So the people who today, the Gen Z and the Gen X and the Gen Ys and all them, they could tell you how many subjects they get, but they don't know their history. They don't know their history. You think you can go to American school and go through all those grades without understanding American history, their version of their history, notwithstanding how much they're taking out of the contributions of the slaves and the indigenous people and their own brutality to those people? But the history is taught every grade, every grade. And in many cases, the history is reenacted, great battles and all these kinds of stories. And not forgetting the films. In every film that you go as a little boy, all the time, all the films that were made, they conquer the Indians in it. They never show you the battles of the Indians beating back the Americans as colonizers. Every movie you looked at, every Apache films and so on, it looked like they're slaughtering Apaches while they come out victors and so. But that is their way. To the victor goes the spoils. So the narrative of the victor doesn't include the vanquished. But we here have neither history from victor or nor vanquished. And we make no effort to change that narrative. How are you going to stop people from crossing over when they don't know the history of their own ancestors. As far as they're concerned, history began with the PPP because some of them are too young enough to know anything about the PNC. Some of them are too young to know about the struggles into independence, the decolonization struggle. And some of them, many of them don't want to know. They tell you point blank. They tell you point blank, man, I don't want to hear that. But that comes from a lack of understanding. It comes from not imbuing these people with a sense of pride, with their history, their culture, and so on. And I tell you, the longer the government, this kind of government, stays in power, is the worse that situation will become. I think two Thursdays ago, I made reference to the fact that this government seems to have an aversion with getting diplomatic relations with countries in Africa. Whereas in the other states in the Caribbean, Barbados, for example, has diplomatic relations with all the states in Africa. And they have moved to establish embassies there. And African countries have been moving to establish embassies in Barbados. No such luck here. In Guyana, there's not a single African embassy here. In Guyana, the contacts with Africa are limited. Yet you could have the sovereign president going to Africa and getting an award. For what? For what? Those people come here and did an examination of their descendants, of their diaspora over here. They come here and done it, but they're gone giving awards. And we as a people, what have we done to change this narrative? Are we relying on others to tell our story, to change the narrative? Because that is the only conclusion you could come to. Look in the political realm today, what you have. A sitting government predominantly Indo-Guyanese and an opposition led by an Indo-Guyanese who got his place there because of African Guyanese running from the party that sheltered them, brought them through strife of the 60s and so on, and bring them today. But they don't know that history also. So it is easy for them to be plucked from that shelter with promises of milk and honey. That is what has happened. They're being plucked from a sheltered upbringing into promises of milk and honey. So far, the milk hasn't flowed from the party that they supported and helped to become the main opposition today. And it's certainly in flowing from the party and government for them. For them. Because you have different kinds and different categories of crossovers. You got crossovers of a kind who get senior advisors and all kinds. And you got other crossovers who got to work like a donkey, sell papers in the hot sun. And the best you could get is a backbencher MP. And for that, you become the house slave because you're better than the field slaves, them who up on Facebook every minute of the day trying to make the government look good. But meanwhile, they can't point to one thing that they have got as a result of the crossover. Again, lack of history. Lack of history. Because when the crossovers were taking place in the 70s, many of them for ideological reasons, A few of them, obviously for sustenance reasons, because at that time it was felt by some of the PPP people that they will never get into power. And therefore some of them couldn't take that. So they crossed over. But all of them who crossed over got something of substance from the Bonham government. All who crossed over from the PPP. Yes, many of them were called the same thing too. They weren't called house slaves because Indians ain't got no history of slavery in Guyana. But they were called Nimakarams, ungratefuls. But they didn't care. Vincent Tika didn't care. Ranjit Chandy Singh didn't care. Mumtaz Majid didn't care. Halim Majid didn't care. Lal Bahadur didn't care. Silo Baichan, all of them crossed over and got big positions. Look, these crossovers today. Selling your soul is a problem. It will always be a problem. It will always be a problem. Ask Judas. Judas thought he had sold his soul to the highest bidder, 30 pieces. Then what he did afterwards, he realized the mistake that he made. Because that soul ain't got a price. Ain't have a price. He sold it for 30, which might today worth billions. Yet you got others who selling theirs for pittance, for a mess of pottage. That's what they're selling theirs for. If we continue this historyless approach, then, as I said, we will remain fodder for the other. In recognition of the Demerara, the 1823 Demerara revolt, Bonham, that great man again, removed the name of Murray, Governor Murray, from Murray Street and replaced it with Quamina. So today, what you know as Quamina Street was previously Murray Street, that honored Governor Murray, brutal governor. And today you know it as Quamina Street, in honor of Quamina, whose head was severed after he was captured and put on a stake and left there to rot, in memory of what can happen to others if they rebelled. So that continued my piece that I wanted to be part of the continuing liberation month of the emancipation of the Africans. Every time I read the story of the 1823, I get goosebumps and tears come, tears flow freely. When you read that thing with the emotion that it should be read, you tell yourself, no, never should it happen to you again. Never. And somewhere, somehow, that and other aspects of African Guyanese history have to be told, both to the last generation and the generations to come. We have to find a way. We have to find a way to preserve that history and to package it in a manner that it can be made easily available. You know, just as how we start all of these different programs with the national anthem, with the pledge, and we end with the national anthem, we could start these things with a slice.
of African history also. We could say the pledge, and then it can be followed by 2 or 3 minutes of a moment in African history. We know maybe these Gen Z and RZs and so on don't like things in long. They like it packaged no more than 150 words and so on. We can get these things done. It always boils down to how many people involved, who involved, and money. And unlike the others, the Africans in Guyana don't have particular money. They don't have money. We don't have too many businessmen. We don't have too many employers that look like us anymore. And so these things that cost money are very difficult to put together. And we don't have a sympathetic government that is willing to make our taxpayers' money available for such purposes. I go back again, and maybe EPADG and all the other groups should be doing it. Maybe they should band themselves together and make their way to the office of the president to find out what is the government doing in this, the second decade, for peoples of African descent. What is the government doing? Don't tell us anything what you're doing for nationally. Tell us what you are doing specifically in the context of the decade, what you are doing for people of African descent in Guyana. Just like how you do for the Amerindians. Just like how you do for the Amerindians. Many Africans have lost jobs and so on, but you didn't seek to give them a cash grant specific to them of 250,000 or 500,000. But you will do it for sugar workers, you'll do it for rice farmers, you'll do it for fishermen, and you'll do it for everybody else except the African. And yet we sit down and take this. Yet our leaders that we elect wouldn't say anything about it. Yet all the 200 something, 300 something African groups that we have in this country don't seem to wake up about this. Almost 2 years finished already. And yet the government has not rolled out a program specific in the context of the second decade. UN declared second decade. Nothing. Nothing. You don't hear anything from the existing EPADG. You don't hear anything about the 300 plus groups. Nobody is making any effort to make this decade a success and to get the government to commit but we go on and we want to worry with the news, the next news, who cross over. Some of these totally irrelevant names cross over. And then the what? So what? When people were crossing over from the PP, the names, you hear the names I talked about just now. Ranjit Chandi Singh was a super ideologue, top notch in the PPP. He was close to Chedi Jagan. He might have been number 2 or number 3. He was a known ideologue. Vincent Tico, one of the best ministers of education. Those were people of caliber, people of integrity, people of substance. Oh, you hearing some name something crossover. Who are these people? What did they do? What have they done for their group? What have they done for their group? What is their claim to fame? Well, there was chairman of what? Chairman of what? That is the extent to which that party has thing. When you look at who were chairman of the PNC, how they got there, and so on. When you look and see who were general secretaries of the PNC, how they got there. Oscar Clark, Talmy Reed, Kenneth King, all those people were general secretaries. Big people, long-standing people, and so on. People of might, people of substance, and so on. You hear now today somebody join the party and tomorrow they're chairman of the party. Somebody come from somewhere, they vex with something, they join up the PNC, and next thing you know, they're general secretary of the party. Meanwhile, they holding down all these fancy names, and yet still a group in Cameroon don't never hear about them, or a group in Port Kaituma never heard about them, or a group in Kokwani never heard about them. So they're like Georgetown chairman and Georgetown general secretaries and so on. That party needs a lot of work if it's to come back and be the true competitor that it was under the days of the Bonhams and even under Height. It's fallen a long way. And if it's green art, if it wants to get back to green art, because right now it's not green art, if it wants to get back to that green art status, then those roots gonna have to be watered a lot for it to maintain its stature and to get to its preeminent position that it had before. My contribution to the August today was the Demerara Rebellion. There was a lot to be said today, but it's not going to be said because I thought that 1823, 18th of August event, which got lost on the 18th of August, because I said I know there was a little observance by the APNU there, but these little observances got to stop. These things got to be national. They got to be in the consciousness and the psyche of the nation as a whole. We can't keep these little things in these little silos anymore. We can't. We have to rouse the African population in this country. We have to rouse them, awaken their consciousness where this is concerned. This is this lack of consciousness that got them like tumbleweed in the wind at the moment. This got to change. While money is important, if you don't know how to spend money, when you get it, it will be done, it will be gone before you even know it. Consciousness got to be awakened. Now, as we know, school will be reopened shortly. In another week or so, school will be open toward the 1st of August. You know, when growing up, as you well know, it was unheard of for school to be opened in August. In fact, as a way of insult or otherwise, we used to say, like, you go to school in August. You know, which means that you're dotish, you're stupid, you're foolish, or whatever. You just make a reference like you go to school in August. But no more. This is about the third time, I believe, or maybe even more, I don't know, that schools in Guyana will be opening in August. I'm not sure why it couldn't open the 7th of September. But then again, I guess if it did, it will then mean that school will close closer to Christmas than the curriculum or the Ministry of Education will want it. And then, of course, times have changed. The whole business about going to school in August and the slurs and so on about it, all that technically has changed. I remembered when I was forced going to university in the United States, I was asked to be there for the middle of August, and I was shocked because I studied in England, and there, when I went there in England, university started in October. Now here is in United States, university started in August. And then as I got to know United States more and more, I realized that many schools in many districts in many states, school starts in August. And I know in Atlanta, for example, they have graduation in schools in May, right? April, May, graduation and whatever. Whereas our schools here go till to July and so on. So that is neither here nor there. Schools now opening in August this year, August the 31st. And the first observation I want to make is that I saw that they're putting out tenders to rebuild St. Sidwell School. You know, St. Sidwell School that is at the corner of Hatfield and Vicinian Road, Hatfield Street and Vicinian Road, and it's in this churchyard of St. Sidwell's Church. And there's a bell ground there. I think it's St. Sidwell's bell ground and so on. And I saw this tender that they've been putting out to rebuild the school right there. And I want to indicate to the Ministry of Education that it will be unwise to rebuild a school there. Now that the school is in need of rebuilding as opposed to repairs, it's a chance to remove the school from there. The school is unhealthily placed there, obviously, because it's next door to a burial ground, which is overcrowded. Because when they had that burial ground there before, I guess it was only a few uncertain parishioners and so on. But now it's overflowing. Too many people have been buried there. Secondly, that is a very, 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 very busy confluence, made worse by the increased traffic flow. So to cite a school right at the confluence at Hatfield Street and Vicinian Road today is madness. The school is cited there at a time when Georgetown itself stopped at Brigham. And so where the school is cited would have been Lodge Village. It wasn't part of Georgetown. So traffic and all these things might have been a horse and buggy, a bicycle, and so on. But today, look what you have, choking traffic around that part. And you are telling me you are going to rebuild a primary school there? I say this is an opportunity to recite the school someplace else. And growing up in Hatfield Street, I spent a good 7-8 years living in Hatfield Street. So I know about Hatfield Street. And passing there earlier in the week, I saw that there's a large empty plot of land west of the new fire headquarters. Large plot of land there, where that school can be sited. That school can be put right there. Fairly large school, piece of land. It allows for recreation, and sports of different kinds and so forth. And a fairly large school can go there. So I am urging the Ministry of Education to relook at that proposal. And what can be put there at St. Sidwell's there, maybe where the school is at the moment, maybe you could think about putting a youth club down there. A youth club that won't require the numbers of children to be going there on a daily basis. Then, as school is near to open, I saw Kedaki talking about it earlier, that they're going to be marking the pedestrian crossing in Buxton and so on. I'm appealing to the Public Works Ministry to have a deep campaign to remark the streets. It's very important. I was looking at Hunter Street. Hunter Street has a very peculiar set of markings that were there when the street was reopened. It would appear that 2 lanes of traffic go, I think the 2 lanes of traffic go south and 1 lane goes north, or vice versa. But so that's a strange arrangement. So it requires the markings. All the markings on that street are almost gone. They're almost gone. And so that 1/3 line, 2/3 line, because it's not a center line anymore, because you got 2 and 1 lane, 2 lanes going one place and 1 lane go. So it's not a center line anymore. So that 1/3 line, 2/3 line, whatever, that heavy yellow line, orange line that you cannot cross and so on, needs to be there. It needs to be there. And the markings needs to be there. And the pedestrian crossings, the many pedestrian crossings that are on that street, they need to be put back there. You have the West Rhineville Primary School that is in Hunter Street there. And you got a lot of speed bumps. You need to paint those speed bumps because there's no warning that speed bumps are ahead. You know, in this country, we take so many things for granted. We're so beaten down. I'll talk about this maybe later if we get time. We're so beaten down that we just take it. But can you imagine even coming at a normal speed? Normal, no excess speed or anything. Coming at a normal speed, and you go into one of these high-speed bumps. No markings, no warning about speed bumps ahead or so on. Takes away your shocks. In some cases, takes away a whole wheel. Nobody is responsible. Nobody is responsible. You can sue from now to eternity. What kind of country is this? It cannot be a modern country. What would it take for a street sign appropriately placed that tells you speed bump ahead 200 yards or 200 meters or whatever the case may be? What would it take to mark the speed bumps so you could see them in the night, evening blackout? But more important, what would it take to maintain roads so that they give longer service? And maintaining roads includes marking these roads properly. You just learned that driver's licenses are given away a dime a dozen at $100,000 a pop. So we got large numbers of drivers there who never pass a competency test or never went through a driver's test. So they don't even know what some of these markings mean. And when you don't have the markings anyhow, and there's an accident, who's wrong and who's right? These little things should not have to get me or anybody else to come out here and talk about them. The Ministry of Public Infrastructure, Public Works, whatever it is, should have a vehicle, a traffic vehicle, a road maintenance vehicle and crew going around the country every day, and observing these things and correcting them. You should have to wait to tell you that Hunter Street, a street that is used so much, all the markings have literally gone from the street. And so it's Wild West season there. And then, of course, as I said, it's that strange combination of two lanes going one way and 1 lane going the other way. So you're not too sure with no markings if you're in the right lane or in the wrong lane. So, and especially where they have schools, please, all those pedestrian crossings need to be marked. Some of the clowns who call themselves drivers, they don't even know what a pedestrian crossing means. Daily, I encounter them stop on the pedestrian crossing and telling you, go around the vehicle. They're stopping on the pedestrian crossing and telling you, go around the vehicle. They ain't coming off the pedestrian crossing. And all this can happen because of a system that does not carry severe penalties and implement them. You think any driver in the right mind will pass a bus, a school bus, during school time with their signal out or whatever is the appropriate thing? Do you think a driver there rev the engine and whatever else, like if you're there on a circuit, while a school monitor is there allowing school train to cross and so on, all these nonsense you see that happening in this country. All kinds of things you see motorists running in and out of traffic, passing policemen with no helmet on, passing policemen up and down, driving like the head in good, and nothing happens to them. Nothing happens to them. And that's the case. So all the money can come to this country, but these simple broken glass theory, if you don't do anything about them, they will multiply, fester, become like this here. So I am, on behalf of the school children and so on, the school opening on 24th August, I appealing for the roads and the school markings and so on. And I also appealing to the Ministry of Education not to recite St. Sidwell School in the place. There's a huge plot of land next door to the fire headquarters. Recite the school there. Allow the children to play freely and in a safe environment. And of course, while we're on school, I want to congratulate the students, all the students who wrote the CXC and CAPE. See, I congratulate all the students who wrote the CXC and the CAPE. Congratulations go out to all those who have gained various subjects in various fields and various subject areas and so on. For those who have not meet the threshold of 5, minimum 5, I say again, it is not, there's nothing that has been lost on you. It is up to you after the crying and whatever else you may want to do to talk to your parents, talk to mentors, elders, and so on, talk to your own peers and so on as to what you may want to do going forward. You see, the school system, I see the Minister of Education, all them crowing. First of all these people who write taught the subject. I didn't even know taught the subjects existed in the school system. I didn't know this. Can anybody itemize what are these taught the subjects? A girl wrote taught the subjects. She got 23 ones, 6 twos, and 1 3. Another one wrote 27 subjects, like the guy last year, and she got 26 ones and 1 2 or something like that. And when you ask these students why you're writing these subjects, many of them are telling you they're writing to get scholarships. What scholarships are being offered by the government at the CXC level? Let me hear. With scholarships? Scholarships to overseas universities? I would suggest if that is the case, the government should pull back on this business about offering scholarships at the CXC level to go overseas and allow them to write CAPE and offer the scholarship at the CAPE level, and then to offer a scholarship in the areas of interest to the country. After all, if somebody wants to go and do rocket science, at this particular point in time, that is not a priority in this country. The government must make all of these things absolutely clear beforehand, not after. Before. They should put up what are the critical areas of interest to the government in the sciences, in the arts, in the tech work, in the business, so that the children know if they want to get a scholarship in this area, especially to go overseas, this will be the requirements. And going overseas, CXC should not be a requirement. CAPE should be the requirement. Why send people to do a 4-year degree when if they got CAPE and so on, they could finish that degree in 3 years? And why send people to overseas when they may have the very program right here at the University of Guyana? This thinking has to imbue so that people don't run out there and say how they're doing 30 subjects. And that in any case, I heard the government first was Priyo Manik Chan and then now this one here and so on talking about, well, let them write how much they want. With what, for what, and with what purpose? And here, you have a problem. Because now the government is paying for all the subjects that you write. So the government is paying for 30 subjects compared to the 7 or 8 that my friend over there might be writing. There has to be a cutoff on this payment. Has to be. And since all those 30 subjects end up really being just maybe 10, then the government must say, listen, I'm paying for these 10. You could go ahead and write the other 30, but you're going to pay for the other 20. After all, if you're doing biology and then human biology and then you're doing general science and then you're doing zoology, that's 4 different subjects, but there's only one biology. How many bodies the human being could have? So I think the government got to look carefully at exactly what it is they're doing where this is concerned and the scholarships that they may be offering. And that I see, for example, they're calling this girl a top performer. But we don't know that yet, because if you recall last year, the boy got 27 subjects. I think the girl got 26 or something like that. But the girl was the top performer. Why? Because she checked all the CSEC boxes. He didn't check all of them. He may have had 27, but he didn't check all the boxes. And even if he checked all the boxes, he didn't check them with grades that were higher than her grades. But everybody went into their feelings. Oh, he got 27, therefore he should be top. It didn't go like that. It didn't go like that. So somebody could have written 10 subjects, got 10 A's, checked all the boxes, and they become the top student, and they're entitled to the government of Guyana scholarship for overseas. So the government we have to, I mean, I really don't quite understand all this 30 subjects and all this kind of story. I mean, most of us at our age, all of us of our age and below or so on, will tell you that we wrote how much, 7, 8, 9, and we can't tell ourselves that these 30 subject people are any better off than us or so on. And I always remember Marcel Hudson, former chief education officer, his son at QC, wrote 5 subjects at the CXC in fourth form, got all 5. And you know what he did? He then left school, went straight to UG. Today, I think he should be in his 2nd year or something already. Going to graduate well before he reach 17 or I think he left at 14 or something like that, 13 or 14. So by the time he's 17, he already has a first degree. 17, 18, he already has a first degree. 5 subjects CXC. That's the minimum requirement to get into UG. Now imagine you going into UG with your 30 and you're 27. All we sitting down in the same bench in the same class. All we gonna graduate the same year. And even if you graduate with a distinction and I graduate with a distinction, at university level, we all graduate with distinction. There's no difference. This is where this has to be carefully considered by the government, especially when taxpayers' money is involved. The private student can do whatever the hell they want. But when the government is being asked to pay the fees for 30 subjects or 35 subjects, because every year it's getting worse. Last year, 27 was the highest ever written. To this year, here is 30. Next year might be 35. But I must spare a thought and compliment the guy from Queen's College who wrote both CXC and CAPE and did brilliantly. Now that is the kind of person you want to encourage. In fifth form, he wrote both the CXC, I think it's 16 or something like that, and CAPE, 7 or 8 CAPE with many ones in them. That is the person you want to encourage. Smart thinker. Smart. And before I left this topic, I want to say, I keep saying I hate every year all these things about we asked CXC to tell us. This is what the minister, I think, was saying. We asked CXC to tell us all the students who got 8 ones and more, and they came back with 250 something in Guyana. And you start crowing about, things are improving and all these kind of stories. I hate these things, especially coming from people who are not statistically inclined and therefore cannot make a reasoned analysis based on statistical inferences. Hate it. How many people wrote the CXC? Thousands. Thousands wrote the CXC. But you're telling me you go and ask the CXC for tell you how many of them got 8 ones and over, and they came back with 252 or some number like that. A tiny infinitesimal amount compared to the people who wrote the CXC. And then what is the purpose of asking how many got 8 ones and over? Why? Is there some magic about 8 ones and over? Do you get something because you got 8 ones? I don't know that is any big set of thing. What happened to the people who get 5 ones? They should feel slighted. What happened to the people who got 5 CXCs? Maybe three twos and 2 threes. They should feel slighted. They didn't perform. They're entitled to go into UG with 3 twos and 1 and 2 threes. So what is this big song and dance you all making? What is this big song and dance you all making over who get 8 ones and all this kind of thing? Let me tell you something. Y'all must stop this nonsense. Stop it. Because every time you go and take money from CDB and all this kind of thing, you're talking about tech work education, but you never highlight tech work education after you don't sign the loan. You never make that very, very, very plain exactly what this tech work thing means. It is always the academic, the physics, the chemistry, and so on. Let me tell you, a country like Guyana, right now, see what skills are in demand. Check it and see. The technical institutes can't put out enough graduates in those tech work skills before they are gobbled up by the oil and gas. And those people work for way more money than even the doctors ask them. Even the doctors ask them. And the school system that enormous sums of money are being spent, are still throwing out too many so-called non-graduates. So-called because why? The system is not set up to identify and nurture individual skills. And they still look down upon tech work, no matter what they say. In the school system, where is the sewing class? Where is the tailoring class? Where is the woodwork class? Where is the metal bending class? Where are all these classes? Very early, and through a mentor or a guidance counselor, people who are not tending towards academic can be helped in the tech work stream from very early so that they can acquire a skill, so that they don't have to and get a school leaving certificate that you don't have to get maths and English to do. There's nothing fantastic about maths and English. I got one of the greatest mechanic. He ain't got to know mechanic school or so on, but he will tear down a car and put it back and drive comfortably. I know him for 40 years. He went to know King School and so on, but he could. Some people are like that. They may not, you know, he could see an engine in a book and can't think the parts and so on. But put an engine in front of you and he could tell you all them different things. He is not any less or worthless in society. And we got to stop the way how we treat our students. Every student is important. We just have to identify and help them bring this skill out. Bring this skill out. Look today, we grew up with dressmakers, seamstresses, tailors, and so on. Can you find a dressmaker and a seamstress today? Notwithstanding you're buying all them things ready-made. Yeah? Well, I tell you something now. Last week, for the past 3 weeks, we've been looking for a tailor to sew some school pants for my grandson. We went to our regular tailor, we see place lock up. We got another one somebody sent me to, we hear he on vacation and he ain't coming back till September. And so we going all around, almost to give up. And then I remembered I had a tailor when I used to live in Lodge. Sydney Sargent from Lodge Housing Scheme. But I know he moved and went to North Rhineville. And I went there to Sydney when I was a minister because I had bought a suit from, I think, from Burlington or JCPenney. Nice suit. And I was going to use it to read the budget. I think it's the 2016 or 2017 budget. But it came with the pants. The pants was not folded. You had to go and carry it a tailor for them to do it. And you know, you dare not try that in the United States for them to hem up the pants. One set of money. So I brought it home, found Sydney, give me the pants to sew it up and so. When I gave him the pants, he was telling me, man, he got too much work. But he said, man, I need a suit for so date, because that's the date I read in the budget. He said, because you were going to do it. Right? He charged me a little extra and thing. I ain't got no problem. And so when I called upon Sydney the other day, Sydney retired from tailoring. Sydney was such a fantastic, retired from tailoring, age now and so on. And he passed down it to his son, but y'all know them Gen Z and so on into it. So I was referred to another person that he helped. So and so on. I went there to the person, and the person said, "Bye, I got too much work. You see all this work here, I got too much work." And I beseech you and them thing and tell him, man, Sydney send me and so on. He said, all right. He said, I can get one for you before school open. And so to entice you to make certain that I get the one, I said, well, let me pay you for the one already. I said, how much is it? He said, $5,000. $5,000 to sew one pants? One school pants for school buy? $5,000. And I'm saying to myself, if only we can teach these children, bend them into the areas that they're looking like they have things. Many of these girls are fantastic with things like nails and hair and so on. They don't have to come out to school and go to no nail salon and school. These things can be offered in the school and help them along. I know you got a development bank. Begin to teach them in the schools of the development bank and ask them, show them how to write up applications to these banks so that they could enhance this business that they might have shown in the school system that they have capacity for. Can you imagine? We don't have tailors anymore. But just imagine $5,000 for school pants, one school pants. That's 25 US. 25 US. If ready-made, we could comfortably have bought maybe one, two. Just to sew. And that is what I'm saying. There are no sewing machines anymore in the school system. But when we built the multilateral schools, they had sewing machines, teaching children how to sew. And we could then have these children in terms of their work study by the time they get to fourth form. We could attach them to various places instead of attaching people to places that they got them doing what, sitting down or moving a piece of paper here or putting a file there and so on. We could attach these children to genuine work study areas. Attach them to general work study areas. Attach them to tailors. Attach them to mechanics. We'll let it get hands-on, real-time story. So they don't have to go to a GTI. GTI is for people who never go through the school system. But bring the GTIs to the school system. Those who are in the school already, let them do that. And they don't have to write no exam. Let them do it practically. For example, if they show them exams to do with cutting the cloth, exams for the stitching, them is the different exam. You run them with maths and English and all this kind of story. You could teach them how to count the money. But I know many vendors, you go to many vendors, they can't read and write, but they can count the money. So we mustn't hang up. We mustn't be hung up on this academic. When you got large numbers of people you're throwing out in the system and you're making them failures because you're telling them they get 5. And you're telling them how they can't go UG. You don't got to go UG to make money in this country. You got to nurse. You got to help them nurse the skill that they inherently have, bring it out and teach them little money sense and use that opportunity to make money. Finally, on the school system story, right? So that one I had to get out because I really feel that it. And we back to the traffic. I feel that this country getting like United States, perhaps worse. So a mandatory subject when you reach 5th form is to teach driver's ed in the school. So regardless whether you're going to drive in future, you must know, you must have fast driver's ed. It's one of those life skills kind of story that we must imbue in you. Driver's ed. So you don't have to go and worry anymore about going by the police station, thing. You can do it in class and you can better pass it. It could be monitored by the police if you want. But do it in schools. So all 14, 15, and 16-year-olds would have done driver's ed. Theory. The practice is left up to them and their parents when they reach the eligible age for driving. But there's so many cars and increasingly so many students coming to school and TIs and all these things with cars and universities and so on with cars that it will pay to start doing driver's ed as a compulsory subject in the school system. In the school system. You know, I wanted to deal with this blackout, but I'm going to switch out to the blackout because I know the blackout going to come. Listen, Yogi Berra, remember that man? Probably don't know he baseball. He's credited with deja vu all over again. Deja vu all over again. This morning, get up to do my exercise, my walking. I call it exercise, but it's walking really and so. And as I looked over to West Rhineveld, complete blackness. Look down Cemetery Road, black. In blackout. Then I saw a partner of mine, long-standing partner, walking also. I said, man, what's going on? He said, "Bah, he had blackout." I said, "How long you had this blackout for?" He said, about 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock, midnight. So West Rhineville, the whole area, maybe I don't know if Alexander Village and whatever, but certainly West Rhineville from 12 o'clock to about nearly 5 o'clock. 5 hours of blackout. We here in South, we weren't spared. Around about 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, right down to the night, sometime late afternoon, going into the night, blackout. Sunday gone, they tell us that blackout would have been from 6 to 2. Right? That will make it 8 hours. Instead, we ended up with 10 hours of blackout. And so this thing continues. And the frequency of the blackout is what is really killing you. Because if you tell me, okay, all right, Sunday, you're going to get 10 hours, that's long, and it's hard. But then you're going to come back Monday and give me a blackout, Tuesday and give me a blackout. You skip a day and then you remind me again on Thursday and so on, blackout. This thing is really, really getting you, And for those of us who lived through the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, but certainly during the 70s and 80s and 90s, this blackout here is a constant reminder, of what this country will continue to experience because of those who are in charge. It was the same thing in the 70s and the 80s. It is the same thing under a different government. Basics. At least the 70s, 80s, and them, they didn't have money, but they had a planning construct. They had a whole planning secretariat. They didn't have money. This one got money. Billions of it. Billions of US dollars unheard of in the history of this country. Billions of it. And you got comparable situation that today it's worse than what you expect when we went through the 70s. Worse if you compare, because this one got the money. This one bringing in all kinds of consultants from all over the place. The other day, they signed up big management contract again with the people from Dominican Republic. I don't know, they just come out the blues and they get big fat management contract. And every person they bring in this country, the blackout just gets worse. And the so-called savior that they talked about, the gas to energy project, where they're now trying to assuage you by putting up pictures on this one Facebook and Ali Facebook about telling you what stage like if showing we couple things going up in the air is progress. None of them can tell you for sure when this project is going to come on stream. But when they want to find a patsy to put it out there to save the government, they know who to go to. Now you're hearing this 300 megawatt gas to shore that was supposed to give you 300 megawatts since 2024 ain't gonna be giving you 300 in any time soon. They're saying how at the end of the year we might get 50. We might get 50 megawatts to put on stream. And we may get another 200 sometime in 2027. How can these things be of any comfort to the citizens of this country? How can it? Eh? But you know what? You know what is really for a citizen of this country who has gone through all kinds, who has been involved and so forth. You know what really gets you upset? It's the fact that the noise made by a certain set of people in this country when a black government is in charge, You don't hear them making the same noise when an Indian government is in charge. They like to tell you or give you the impression that black people can't run anything. Black people can't manage anything. That is why they have it out for Burnham and they have it out for Granger. Now and then they spare Height because Height thought that he could buck politics. When Height was given victory in 1985, December, I think it was, he allegedly won that elections with a percentage greater than what Burnham ever had. So he took that to mean that the citizens, that percent of the citizens in this country gave him that mandate. And so he tried to overthrow a political system that was in place that recognized all the nuances of this society. Alas, he didn't understand this society. So while he sometimes escape now and then, they don't want to be harsh on him because of the changes he supposedly tried to put in place. They be harsh on Burnham and Granger. And I will never forget some of them in the misguided, uncouth ways tried to tell us in 2017, some of them in the private sector, disrespectful to President Granger at the time. But look what we're going through today. Look what we're going through today. Can you imagine you got a government telling you to turn off this and turn off that? We tried that. Burnham tried that. Hoyt tried that. Couldn't work. Who listens to you? You think the person who got on the AC is going to turn off the AC? Because it's called that behavior, right? We used to use it in game theory. The prisoner's dilemma. It's somewhat of the prisoner's dilemma. When you tell me turn off my AC, I keep my AC on thinking that you, the other neighbor, going to turn yours off. But the probability of both of us turning off our AC because he said so is low. Because each one of us thinking the other one going to turn their own off and creating the space for the power to continue. It don't happen like that. Both of us will keep our AC on. Hence the blackout. So telling us that we must turn off X and Y in peak hours, go back, check the papers. You will see how much time Burnham and Height tell us to do that. And when it didn't happen, you had to load shed the entire place. And in the land of so-called progress, you are telling businessmen to come off the grid in peak hours. You're telling businessmen to come off the grid in peak hours. In the land of progress. And look what they're doing to Linden. Look what they're doing to Linden. Linden gets soft because their situation cannot be solved in a hurry. The electricity that they're getting is from bauxite, which is the excess electricity that was always being generated from the bauxite industry. Bauxite is being ramped up, so they're probably using more of their energy and less available for Linden. Meanwhile, Linden is growing. People going and buy AC, People got sawmill and all kind of story. So now you got demand, huge rise in demand, almost static supply. Now the jokers finding it out. And electricity is not like other things. Now they could perhaps temporarily solve that by getting Caterpillar or one of them to carry in some sets. And I don't know, since Linden is not on the national grid, whether that can work. But maybe they're gonna have to try it because Linden cannot continue in the kind of blackout that they are getting day in and day out. But this is what you have. You turn a country over to accept the people who think that they got a divine right to rule it because they got the numbers. They don't have the management capacity. They don't have the technical competence, and this has been proven over and over and over and over again. You got the sugar, you got the, I mean, show us where we have similar. Show us where we have similar failures. Like the sugar, 200 million US, fiber optic cable, and all of these. Show us. But every time they come after a black government to install a set of people who think that they got a divine right to rule this country. And every time it shows up, their incompetence, their technical incapacity, their managerial incompetence, and it shows up, and they got billions of US dollars available to them. Billions. Billions and billions and billions. And still, we are in a situation where there's no end in sight to blackouts. And the very power that you need to power the economy is not there, and it's not going to be there in a hurry. And God forbid, if one of them power ships goes down due to maintenance, technical failure, or so on, because the whole country is going to be in blackout. That is the stage that we are at. And we as a people are going to continue to be in this stage if we continue to behave the manner in which we behave. We like to blame the politicians. Politicians are a product of the society, the circumstances, or the environment from which they come. That is what we are. You don't want a situation where a coalition government came in, stabilized the economy, got rid of the corruption, got rid of the extrajudicial killings. People can breathe in the society again. They can go about their lawful business. Gradually, we were increasing incomes. Gradually, we were improving the aesthetics in the society. You didn't want that. You didn't want that. You want promises of milk and honey. As if in history there's ever been known to distribute milk and honey to anybody, to serfs and feudals and so on. But we keep falling for this con game all the time. Suffer for it. Tell ourselves we're going to do better. Tell ourselves that we are going to do better. But fall right back into the trap. Fall right back into the trap. Now we are known as a land of many force. All of them. All of them. Not flattering. Here is Telford Lane, as he tells us. Guyana is #1 most corrupt country in the English-speaking Caribbean. It's #1 in the Caribbean with the most severe form of poor mental health. It's number one in the Caribbean for teenage pregnancy. It's number one in the Caribbean for domestic violence. It's number one in the Caribbean for the dirtiest capital. It's number one in the Caribbean for the highest suicide rate and attempts. It's number two in the Caribbean as the most racially divided country. It's number two in the Caribbean with the lowest human development. And we are number two only ahead of Haiti. And we are number two in the Caribbean with the biggest brain drain. And that growing up, even at university, Guyana, writing different papers and so on, we knew about the brain drain. And in 2026, it is 50 years this year since I entered University of Guyana. And in 50 years afterwards, we're talking about the biggest brain drain being in Guyana, in the Caribbean. And of course, Guyana is number three in the Caribbean with the lowest paid workers. Notwithstanding, we're the leading economy in the Caribbean with the fastest growing in the world. And like Telford Lane, I predict that the worst is yet to come. I predict the worst is yet to come. Blackouts in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, 2020, into 2030. Almost over a million barrels of oil per day to be produced before the end of this month. Yet, there's a sense of hopelessness in this country. Hopelessness. As he said, Guyanese are hopeless. We have learned helplessness. We have no self-preservation. We do not think we are deserving of better. We are a passive set of people in a survival mode. We aren't living. We aren't living. We're just surviving. And we are just broken from oppression, marginalization, and fear-mongering. That is us. That is us. So we're going to sit here and we're going to complain about blackout, even though we were on the road to eliminating blackout. Even our greatest enemy says we did way better with little when it came to blackout. Because why? We had technically competent people. A minister of competence, academically and otherwise. We were shrewd enough to advertise globally and got a Jamaican to come here as general manager. And he was beginning because he was credited with improving Jamaica system. And he had begun to do wonders here. As soon as they came back in 2020, they got rid of him. They got rid of him. A proven leader, a proven successor. Got rid of him. And you look around in all the different areas, a bunch of incompetence, don't know what they're doing, getting big fat salary. Big fat salary and perks and allowances and so on. And they know they don't have to perform because they will not be fired. They know. They know because they would not be pressured the way those pressured the coalition government. You know, I'm going to come on this program. I don't know, Kidaki. But this is a whole, I was going to do this I was going to do this piece maybe I'll just start it and maybe continue it next week if time runs out. Time will run out, but we'll start it. And I talked to you about the Amerindians being slave catchers and so on. There was in Village Voice News, August the 15th, 2026, under the heading, Guyanese must break the divide and conquer politics. Because this is exactly what it is that we're talking about here. I just put there, it's divide and conquer that we're talking about here. We're not talking politics that will uplift our economy. We talk race politics. We talk PPP versus PNC, no win politics. We're not talking politics of unity, politics of progress. No. We end up talking, are we on top politics? With somebody else right on it trying to be on top, all the while wasting resources. Wasting. Look at us today. Poor salaries, talking about 6 regional hospitals, and this regional hospital, and that regional hospital, and none of these hospitals got qualified doctors, qualified specialists. Brand new physical infrastructure, and being at brand new human infrastructure. But we treat that as progress. And we go about telling, oh, how you can't say that, but the government give we a new hospital. But when the baby dead, when they go in there to get a routine birth, whether cesarean or normal, baby dead, now they're running to win for them to highlight the problems that they got. Brand new hospital. When the rain, it comes soaking through the roof. Buckets are being set to collect water. That is the conditions under which you want those poor people to work. Brand new hospital, I mean, got ambulance. Or they ain't got aircraft to airlift a very sick infant out to the hinterland to bring them to Georgetown. But in that same hinterland, you had 3 or 4 aircraft carrying government officials said are visiting the communities in the aftermath of the MV Burima tragedy. But we say nothing. We just sit there and we sulk and we hope that things gonna get better. And then they keep us divided. Learned well from the colonial masters. They learned well. So you had this article in Village Voice News, August the 15th, 2026. It was called Guyana Must Break the Divide and Conquer Politics. Says community development advocate and 2017 UG valedictorian Elsie Harry. Kudos to this sister, this black sister. In 2017, she was UG valedictorian. I believe in history, following in the footsteps of former President Granger. And she was speaking at an event hosted by the Amerindian People's Association, APA, on Friday, August 14th. Harry said, quote, there are many rights groups in Guyana. For example, I work within the African Guyanese community. The Amerindian People's Association is working on indigenous rights, but we rarely talk to each other. We rarely meet with each other and form coalitions across our ethnic groups to get things done. End of quote. She continued, Guyana, quote, Guyana continues to suffer from a, quote, divide and conquer approach, end of quote, that was inherited from colonization, that was inherited from colonialism and exploited by the politicians, end of quote. Again, well-meaning academics, academicians, historians, and whoever else always seek to blame the politicians. And again, I'm saying the politician is a creature of the society. And there's a powerful thing called devote. So me seeing why you're blaming politicians when the masses got a vote that they could exercise rationally and prudently and so on. But to the extent that they can be, the old tactic of divide and conquer can still be successful is a consequence of the lack of education or miseducation. And in Guyana's case, it is compounded by racialism. So, indeed, these two most depressed groups in Guyana, the Africans and the indigenous people, they don't seem to understand that in unity there is strength. And they continue to work in silos. Africans for Africans, indigenous for indigenous. But there's history. There's a lot of history. There's lots of history. And part of that history, of course, is the fact that Amerindians are stained by the use of them as slave catchers. That they were used by the British colonials and others to catch runaway slaves in exchange for trade and other, what we will call today, trinkets, or under pressure from the colonials. When the white man arrived here, he met Amerindians and he sought to use them as labor on their emerging plantations. But the diseases that they brought and the extraordinary labor that they were put under, because Amerindians were not accustomed to that. They were gatherers and hunters and fishers just for subsistence. Now they were being forced onto commercial enterprise for the purpose of colonial masters. Soon their populations were decimated. And like slaves and like any human being, they ran away into the dense forests and so forth, those who were still left and so on. So the uneasy truce that existed between the colonials and the Amerindians, in a sense, pressured the Amerindians when needed to use their knowledge of the bush and the hinterland to go and catch runaway slaves. So it is not something that the Amerindians wanted to do. They were pressured into do it. But be that as it may, there's still that antagonism that comes from the history of this, that exists between the Africans and the indigenous. And this is what part of the exploitation that takes place between the two of us. But the history is not told in full because it is not they should not only be remembered for that stain in their history, because many escaped slaves were helped by Amerindians. Many of them found safe haven in Amerindian communities. That particular part of the story is not told. We always only hearing that they were slave catchers and and so forth, and so people exploit that antagonism. So through the years, the dependency of Amerindians on the colonial government and succeeding governments for their sustenance and succor and whatever else is what, in a sense, has stymied greater progress in that society. In the sense that with their growing numbers, they haven't grasped the reality of their politics and the way a united Amerindian community can affect political change in the country. In the late 1950s, it was estimated that the Amerindians was about 4% of the population. And during that time, there emerged an Amerindian leader called Stephen Campbell, around whom the Amerindians rallied. It will recall that Stephen Campbell became the first Amerindian member of the legislature. So from 4% of the population in the 1950s, today Amerindian population is about 10.5 and growing, 10.5% of the population and growing. And now you have this funny thing where an increasing number of the migrants, involuntary and otherwise, to Guyana are of Amerindian descent, coming from principally Venezuela and Brazil, and some from Cuba. So you have that population that is growing at a fairly rapid clip. One that can, if they unite, can influence the politics positively in this country. One, if they understand with good political education, teaming up with the right players, can catapult them into the heartbeat of the country. So Elsie Harry is right. If they continue to operate in silos, both the Africans and the Amerindians, the two most depressed ethnic groups in this country, then there's little hope for improvement or rapid improvement in the status quo. I'll stop here and continue on this topic, this particular topic, when I open next week, Thursday, because it is interesting how, notwithstanding the great strides that we thought that were made in among Amerindians and in Amerindian communities, that they still reverted to voting against their interests in 2020 and subsequently. And why episodes like the 20 who died born up in the fire and the more than 100 who died in the Mvibaramo, why those episodes don't serve as impetuses, but merely as blips along the way. All right, Kodaki, sun is out. Today's Thursday. I think my time is up. And so until Next week, it's goodbye and thank you again.
You know, they say you could be far and you could be near and yet so far. You wouldn't believe I was right here, I'm listening to Mr. Jordan and then I got distracted. And so I didn't even realize the big man come off. Hey yo. Thank you, Mr. Jordan, for your presentation this morning. Thank you, viewers, for tuning in. Let me remind you that there's a group of villagers who are painting pedestrian crossings on the 22nd and the 25th of August, and they're inviting you to join them. If you can scan the QR code that is on your screen, you can join the WhatsApp group there, and you can get further information. If not, you can reach out to me. I'll try to get your link up as to how you can participate. Don't tell me you're overseas because I know you got local relatives. You can ask your relatives so represent you in this worthy cause. Okay, so please do that for me and for us. School is opening and we want to know that our children are going to be safe on the road with all of the confusion.
Arriving in the UK from Guyana, the Caribbean, North America, or elsewhere. Start your journey with ease and comfort by choosing first-class travel service, one of UK's leading providers of premium airport transfers. Enjoy a smooth, stress-free arrival by booking your comfortable and reliable airport taxi before you arrive. With affordable rates and exceptional service, we cover all major UK airports, including Heathrow, Gatwick, Manchester, Birmingham, and many more. Wherever you land, we guarantee a seamless door-to-door experience to and from any UK airport. For your peace of mind, all our drivers are fully DBS checked and cleared, ensuring a safe and trustworthy service from the moment you arrive. Our friendly staff will meet and greet you in the airport arrival hall, assist with your luggage, and escort you to one of our luxurious vehicles. So wait no longer. We're ready to look after you from the moment you arrive in the UK. You can contact us via email info@firstclasstravelservice.co.uk, office phone +4 4195 2287 176, WhatsApp +4 479 136 0576 5 or +4 479 009 50171, or simply fill in our request, a quote form, at www.firstclasstravelservice.co.uk. Travel with confidence. Travel first class.
Planning a party? Worry no more. We have all the supplies you need. At EC Party Rentals, we have folding chairs, folding tables, square tables, round tables, long tables, short tables, big tables. We have chairs, red chairs, gold chairs, white chairs, crystal chairs, chairs of all type, throne chairs. What you want, we have. Food warmers, coolers, ice, beverages. At EC Party Rentals, we have what you need to have a good time. You plan the party, we do the work. Call us 622-5933. Easy Party Rentals. Let's keep your party going.
More dear to me